So Na'Vi, the currently #1 ranked team in the world, was just upset by Endpoint at ESL Pro League Season 16. And right now, Endpoint isn't even ranked within the HLTV top 30, so obviously this is a pretty big upset. But Endpoint didn't just upset Na'Vi, they actually kinda destroyed them. So it was 16-7 on their map pick of Ancient, and then 16-10 on Dust 2, which is of course one of Na'Vi's home maps. So let's take a look at what happened in these games and figure out how Endpoint managed to take down the best team in the world. To start off, I want to highlight how well prepared Endpoint looked in this series, not even with just like strategies or game plan, but every single player on Endpoint looked really sharp and ready to perform. There were no ifs and buts about it. During this series, Endpoint not only looked like the best team, but they also looked like the better individuals, which is super rare to consider when you're going up against Bit, Electronic, and the GOAT in Simple, of course. So that's the first thing to keep in mind, and you will notice it during the game. On Ancient, Endpoint looked super well rehearsed, and it showed on the server. Endpoint won the first pistol round and were also able to convert the first gun round, leading to a 5-0 lead on the T side of Ancient, which is basically the dream scenario to find yourself in on T side Ancient. While Na'Vi would bounce back in round 6 to secure their first round, it wouldn't be long until Endpoint would find yet another round. The beginning of round 7 actually started with a timeout from Endpoint. This is actually really cool to see. Even just losing one round, Endpoint don't really want to let Na'Vi get comfortable, and seeing a timeout from Endpoint being called can subconsciously make Na'Vi feel the need to react or change some part of their play. Now, round 7 doesn't actually start out great for Endpoint. They lose Nerds early on and have to operate in a 4 versus 5 situation. However, they are able to find SDY in Cheetah isolated, and while Simple does try to help out, he is too late to find the trade and instead finds himself being killed as well. So Endpoint have managed to convert a 4 versus 5 situation into a 4 versus 3 situation within a matter of seconds, really. And honestly, it feels like SDY and Simple may have misplayed this mid-round situation. Fast forward a little and Endpoint managed to identify the locations of the remaining Na'Vi players and make a great late round rotate to the A site, managing to win the post plant and secure their 6th round. Na'Vi again, however, would bounce back, leading to a 4-7 scoreline in favor of Endpoint, which, by the way, is already an amazing T-side Ancient. But round 12 is another round that I would like to highlight. Now, round 12 in the beginning doesn't look like anything special. In fact, the round is actually treated as an eco round from Endpoint, with 4 of the 5 players operating with just a deagle, and a couple of them don't even have armor. So this is a round that Na'Vi should be winning almost every single time. Na'Vi choose to run an aggressive A main setup in this round, which isn't necessarily bad, but probably not the most ideal setup to run against a low economy Endpoint. The round starts off with a trade kill where Bit and Crucial go down early. In this situation, Simple also takes a lot of damage, which will have an impact on the round later on. Endpoint actually pull off a really nice boost here over the lurk smoke and are able to catch Electronic out at the back of this site, securing a 3 versus 4 situation against a fully bought up Na'Vi. But it's still a slightly favorable situation for Na'Vi despite the man advantage. But in this situation, Endpoint make a perfect call to rotate back round to the B site. Now, despite losing Mighty Max in middle, Kirby is going to hit an insane shot here onto SDY, who is caught with utility in hand. And this is actually a mistake which is going to lead to the eventual loss of this round for Na'Vi. As we progress into the post plant, Perfecto is put down to extremely low HP, leading to the 2 remaining Na'Vi players sitting at a combined 30 HP. Kirby moves around the site here beautifully, securing the round, and a round which Endpoint had no right winning. Na'Vi end up winning a few more rounds, but at this point the damage had already been done. Endpoint win the half 8-7 and head onto the CT side with an amazing advantage. The CT half for Endpoint couldn't have gone better. The pistol round is secured, and from there the map becomes basically unrecoverable for Na'Vi as Endpoint shut down their force buy and snowball their lead into a 16-7 victory with a flawless CT side and a T side that will probably haunt Na'Vi and Blade for a really long time. Just for some quick stats, Endpoint won 14 opening duels versus the 9 of Na'Vi, but more importantly, 7 of these came from the T side for Endpoint. They also had a 5 versus 4 conversion rate of 85%, which is really good, and a 5 versus 4 conversion rate of 50%. So even if they lost the opening duel, they won the round 50% of the time. So some super sick stats leading to a fantastic map victory for Endpoint. Now we head over to Dust 2, which is a home map for Na'Vi, and it's usually super comfortable for them. and it showed early on in this game. Despite Endpoint winning the pistol round, Na'Vi would respond with 3 rounds in a row, leading to a 1-3 scoreline. Round 5 would initially look pretty good for Na'Vi as well, but Nerds would shut down the B-split attempt with a 4K from Car, single-handedly pushing Endpoint to a second round. While the two teams would trade rounds for a bit, Endpoint would eventually storm ahead, putting together 8 rounds in a row on the CT side and putting together a respectable 10 rounds on CT side. This was actually incredibly impressive, and throughout the whole CT side, the individuals from Endpoint were just straight up better than those on Na'Vi, which again is just incredibly rare to see, and Endpoint were just playing situations so well, especially in man disadvantage situations. So let's take a look at round 9, for example. Round 9 starts off with Na'Vi finding an entry kill towards Long, and the reaction from Endpoint here is perfect. Nerds and Kjaerbye work on finding some mid control due to losing Long. They do this to take some space back and also to figure out if Na'Vi are actually committed to the Long take or are exploring options elsewhere. Now, Nerds is able to find a beautiful timing here onto Electronic to even it out to a 4 versus 4. But this situation is actually super good for Endpoint. In fact, it's better for Endpoint in almost every way. See, Nerds also dropped the bomb when finding Electronic. This leads to a couple of things. First of all, Endpoint now know that it's very likely that Na'Vi are planning to commit to a Long execute, but this situation is basically a nightmare for Na'Vi. First, they have to take the bomb back, which is going to waste a lot of valuable time, and knowing that Endpoint have full mid control, they have to worry about so many positions, including but not limited to lower tunnels, top mid, and T-spawn, and you can see that they have to clear out these positions. This allows Endpoint to prepare for the Long exec, which at this point is basically the only option from Na'Vi. So when it actually hits, Mightymax is able to get a lovely little one-way smoke up on the site, and with the support of his teammates, Endpoint are able to convert the round. The T side for Endpoint started off great once again, as they were able to win yet another pistol round. As a quick note, that means Endpoint won every single pistol round in this series, 4 for 4, and Endpoint were able to quickly convert the pistol round victory into a 15-6 lead with some very nice B executes. Now, Na'Vi were actually able to string some rounds together, getting to a 15-10 scoreline, but the overwhelming lead from Endpoint proved to be far too much for Na'Vi, and Endpoint were able to secure the 2-0 victory over Na'Vi at LAN at ESL Pro League Season 16, so some impressive stuff. Again, for some quick stats, Endpoint had 17 opening kills on Dust 2 versus the 9 of Na'Vi, so basically half the amount. And again, the conversion rates were really good for Endpoint. 76% win rate in 5 versus 4 situations, and 33% win rate in 4 versus 5 situations. So what really led to Endpoint's victory here? First of all, Na'Vi just did not look very good in this series, both individually and tactically. In the whole series, Na'Vi only won 5 T-side rounds, and a lot of the failures on the T-side were due to poor individual fragging from the Na'Vi players. When Perfecto is your best player in a series versus the number 37th ranked team in the world, there are probably some serious issues in there. Now, I honestly don't think this is going to matter too much for Na'Vi. I'm sure they're just going to bounce back from this pretty easily, but this is more of a great showing of potential from Endpoint. This is a super sick performance, and who knew that Kjaerbye would be beating the number 1 team in the world at ESL Pro League in 2022. Regardless, this was a super fun game to watch, and I can't wait to see more of this version of Endpoint because they have shown some really amazing potential here. Thanks for watching, and peace out.